You talk to yourself more than you talk to anyone else. All day long, there's a voice in your head that's narrating your life. It's commenting on how you look, how you feel, how you're performing, whether or not you're good enough, smart enough, capable enough. And here's the thing, we don't even realize it's happening. It's just noise in the background, but it's the most powerful influence on your life. Why? Because the voice you hear most is your own. That internal dialogue becomes the foundation for how you see yourself, how you act, and ultimately, how you live. Let me tell you something that most people never stop to think about. Your self-talk is shaping your identity. The words you repeat, even subconsciously, become the story you believe. And your brain? It listens. It doesn't argue. It doesn't say, hey, wait a minute, that thought isn't helpful. Nope. It just absorbs. So if every time you mess up, you tell yourself, I'm such an idiot, your brain begins to believe that. It wires that belief in. If you start your day looking in the mirror and thinking, ugh, I look awful, gawful, guess what happens? That thought sticks. It becomes a filter for how you experience the rest of your day. That's not just a bad habit, it's a pattern. And that pattern turns into your personality. Here's the truth, we all have a mental playlist running in the background. Some of us have empowering playlists that say, you've got this, you're growing, you're strong. But most people are playing the same tired, self-defeating tracks over and over again. I can't do this. I'm not ready. I always screw things up. No one cares what I have to say. And it's not because you're broken, it's because your brain is for survival, not success. That voice is trying to keep you safe, not help you grow. It's the part of your mind that fears failure, judgment, risk. But when that becomes your default voice, you don't live, you shrink. Now, imagine what would happen if you changed that voice for just 3 days. What if every time you caught yourself thinking something critical or harsh, you paused and said something different, encouraging? True. What if, instead of I'm not good enough, you said I'm learning, I'm trying? That's enough. Instead of I always screw up, you said mistakes are part of growth. You wouldn't just feel better, you'd start showing up differently. Because your thoughts create your feelings drive your actions, and your actions shape your reality. Let's talk about science for a second. Your brain is plastic. That means it changes based on what you do and what you repeat. Every thought you think fires a neural pathway. Repeat it enough, and that pathway becomes strong, automatic, second nature. So when you feed your brain negativity, it builds strong highways of self-doubt. But when you feed it confidence, optimism, resilience, you start building new pathways. You're literally rewiring your brain to believe better things about yourself. And here's the kicker, it doesn't take years. You can start changing the narrative in just a few days of intentional focus. That's how powerful your self-talk is. The reason this works is because your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. If you constantly tell yourself you're overwhelmed, your brain will react like you are. Your heart rate goes up, your stress increases, and your ability to think clearly drops. But if you say, I can handle this, one step at a time, your brain calms down, your body follows, and your energy shifts. This is why athletes use visualization, why high performers talk to themselves out loud before a big moment. It's not weird, it's science, it's strategy. So if you want to change your life, start with your voice. Not the one you use in public, the one no one hears. That's the voice that matters most. That's the one shaping your confidence, your courage, and your capacity to grow. For the next 3 days, speak to yourself like someone worth fighting for, like someone who matters, like someone you're rooting for. Because when you change the way you talk to yourself, you change what you believe about yourself. And when that belief shifts, everything in your life begins to follow. Your brain believes what you tell it. This isn't some feel-good slogan, this is neuroscience. The way you talk to yourself, the thoughts you think, and the stories you repeat day after day are literally shaping the structure and function of your brain. Every time you think a thought, your brain fires a series of neurons. And when you repeat that thought, those neural pathways get stronger. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on repetition. That means whatever you say to yourself the most becomes your reality, whether it's true or not. Now, most of us aren't even aware of the narrative we're feeding our brain. We wake up in the morning and the thoughts start rolling in. I'm so tired. Today's going to be stressful. I have so much to do, I can't handle it. I'm behind again. And you don't stop to question it. You don't stop to interrupt it. You just accept it as fact. But those words, those unchallenged, automatic thoughts, become instructions. Your brain listens. It responds. And it starts acting on that belief. If you tell yourself you're overwhelmed, your brain goes, okay, we're overwhelmed, and it activates your stress response. Your body tightens. Your focus narrows. Your confidence drops, all because of a sentence you said in your own head. Think about this if you walked around all day telling a child you're a failure. You can't do anything right. Nobody likes you. How do you think that child would feel? How would they behave? Eventually, they'd start to believe it. They'd shrink. They'd stop trying. They'd doubt themselves constantly. That sounds like abuse, right? And yet many of us talk to ourselves that way every single day. We say things like, I'm not good enough, I always mess up, I'll never change, and we don't even blink. But the impact is the same. That inner voice shapes your self-image. And your self-image drives your behavior. Here's where the science gets even more powerful. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system, the RAS. It's like a filter that decides what information your brain should focus on. And you program that filter with your thoughts. So if you keep telling yourself, I'm not worthy, your brain will actually start looking for proof to back that up. It will tune into moments that reinforce that story and filter out anything that contradicts it. But if you start saying, I'm capable, I'm learning, I can do this, guess what happens? Your brain starts looking for evidence of that too. It begins to notice your small wins. It spots opportunities. It opens up possibilities you wouldn't have seen otherwise. This is why changing your self-talk is such a powerful tool. Because you're not just thinking positive, you're literally training your brain to work for you instead of against you. And it doesn't have to be some fake pep talk. You don't need to lie to yourself or pretend everything's perfect. That's not the goal. The goal is to choose thoughts that are useful, supportive, and grounded. Instead of I'm not ready, you say, I'm nervous and I can still take the next step. Instead of I always mess this up, you say, I've learned from the past and I'm getting better. It's not about being delusional, it's about being deliberate. And here's something else most people don't realize. Your brain loves habits. It craves repetition. That's why so many of your negative thoughts feel automatic, because they are. They've been rehearsed so many times, they've become your default. But that also means you can train in a new default. You can choose a better script. And yes, at first it will feel awkward. Your brain might resist. But if you stick with it for even a few days, you'll start to feel the shift. You'll start to notice how often that old narrative pops up and how much power you have to rewrite it. The most powerful belief you can hold is this: I can change the way I think. Because once you believe that, everything else opens up. You stop being a prisoner of your past. You stop being defined by your mistakes. You stop waiting for permission. And you start becoming the person you were meant to be. The brain you've got, it's listening. Every word you say to yourself is either programming you to shrink or preparing you to grow. So speak like someone who's building a better future, because your brain will believe it. And your life will start to reflect it. You don't need a full month or a 90-day challenge to start changing your life. Just 3 days. That's it. 3 days of intentional, deliberate effort can interrupt an intra-decade mental pattern you've been stuck in for years. And the reason this works is because most of what holds you back isn't your ability, your talent, or your circumstances. It's your autopilot. It's the default programming in your brain that runs the same limiting thoughts over and over. But the moment you become aware of those thoughts and decide to shift them, even slightly, you begin to break the cycle. Most people underestimate the power of short-term commitment. They think change has to be massive and long-term to count. But in reality, your brain just needs a pattern interrupt, something different, something new, something that disrupts the routine and signals to your mind, we're not doing things the old way anymore. And 3 days is the perfect window. It's short enough to feel doable, but long enough to create momentum. You can handle 3 days. You've pushed through harder things before. You've shown up for people. You've survived chaos. 3 days of talking to yourself differently. You can do that. So what happens when you commit to this? Let's say for the next 3 days, you become the guardian of your own mind. You pay attention to the thoughts that come up. When you catch yourself thinking, I can't do this, you stop and say, no, that's not helping. I can do hard things. When your brain says, I'm so far behind, you say, I'm making progress, one step at a time. When that familiar voice whispers, you're not enough, you say, I am learning. I am growing. I am worthy. And you don't just say it once, you repeat it over and over, because repetition is how you rewire. And here's where the magic starts. Your energy begins to shift. You feel a little more in control, a little more hopeful. That shift in thought leads to a shift in behavior. Instead of procrastinating, you take action. Instead of spiraling, you take a breath. Instead of hiding, you speak up. It might feel small at first, but those tiny shifts, they stack. One small win leads to another. You start building proof that you can think differently, show up differently, and be different. This doesn't require perfection. You're not going to silence all your negative thoughts in 3 days. That's not the goal. The goal is awareness. The goal is to interrupt the cycle. Most of your thoughts aren't even conscious, they're habits. But the moment you become aware of a limiting belief, you gain power over it. And that awareness creates space for choice. You can choose a different thought, a better one, a more empowering one. And when you do that over and over, even just for a few days, your brain starts to adapt. It says, oh, this is how we think now. Okay, it starts building new neural connections to support this new way of being. Let's be real, this won't always feel easy. Your old thoughts are comfortable, familiar. They've been with you for a long time. So when you start changing the way you talk to yourself, your brain might push back. It might say, this isn't true. That's normal. Change always feels uncomfortable at first. But just because a thought feels familiar doesn't mean it's right. And just because a new thought feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. Growth lives in that discomfort. And if you lean into it for 3 days, you'll prove to yourself that change is possible. One of the biggest lies we believe is that we have to feel ready before we can act. But the truth is, action comes before belief. You don't wait to feel confident, you act, and confidence follows. You don't wait to feel worthy, you speak to yourself with kindness, and over time, worthiness takes root. This is why 3 days of intentional self-talk is so powerful. You're not waiting for your life to change, you're changing the way you speak now and watching your life respond. So are you willing to try? Just 3 days. 3 days of catching yourself when the self-doubt creeps in. 3 days of choosing a better thought. 3 days of speaking to yourself like someone you love. Not forever. Just today, tomorrow, and the next day. That's where transformation begins. Not in some far-off future, but right here in the words you say to yourself, one moment at a time. 3 days. That's all it takes to start changing everything. Affirmations can feel fake. That's the honest truth. You stand in front of a mirror saying, I am powerful. I am successful. I am unstoppable, and a part of your brain is like, no, you're not. You didn't even return that email you were avoiding. You feel anxious. You're nowhere near where you want to be. And that disconnect, that's why affirmations don't always work. If the words you're saying don't feel honest, your brain will reject them. That's why instead of repeating lofty affirmations, you need something that actually lands. Something real, something grounded. That's where power statements come in. Power statements are different. They're not about pretending. They're about reclaiming. They're built on truth, on your ability to keep going, on your willingness to try. And most importantly, they speak to where you are right now, not where you wish you were. A power statement doesn't have to be complicated or dramatic. It just has to be believable. It has to be something that cuts through the noise in your head and reminds you of who you are and what you're capable of, even when things feel overwhelming. Take this one, for example. I can handle this. It's not glamorous. It's not over the top, but it's strong. It's grounded. And when you're facing something hard, anxiety, stress, a tough decision, that one sentence gives you something to stand on. Because the truth is, you can handle it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not all at once, But you can face the next moment. You can take the next step. And your brain responds to that. When you say, I can handle this, you trigger a sense of stability. You quiet the chaos. You center yourself in strength instead of fear. Or try this one. I've done hard things before. That's not wishful thinking. That's fact. Think about your life. You've survived loss. You've overcome failure. You've pushed through moments where you didn't think you could make it, and you did. So when you face something new that scares you, this isn't your first time in the fire. Reminding yourself of that is powerful. It reconnects you to your resilience. It grounds you in your own history. You're not starting from zero, you're standing on everything you've already been through. Here's another one, I'm figuring it out. That one is gold because it gives you permission to not have all the answers. You're not saying, I have it all together. You're saying, I'm in the process, and the brain loves progress. It doesn't need perfection to feel safe, it needs movement. So when you tell yourself, I'm figuring it out, your brain says, okay, we're learning, we're growing, we're not stuck. That one sentence shifts you out of defeat and into curiosity, out of shame and into action. The key with power statements is that they're anchored in effort, not outcome. You're not declaring, I'm already there. You're reminding yourself, I'm doing the work. I'm showing up. I'm becoming. That's what makes them so effective. Because the brain doesn't need you to lie, it needs you to lead. You lead with honesty, with compassion, with strength. And every time you repeat one of these statements, you're reinforcing a new identity, someone who doesn't give up, someone who faces things, someone who is becoming who they're meant to be. And yes, it will feel weird at first. Saying these things out loud might feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to tearing yourself down. But that's exactly why you need to say them. You've been rehearsing self-doubt for years. Of course, confidence feels foreign. But every time you speak a power statement, you're interrupting the old programming. You're planting a seed. And the more you repeat it, the more that seed grows. You start to carry yourself differently. You make different choices. You recover faster when things go sideways. So stop worrying about whether you believe the words perfectly. Just focus on whether they help. Do they ground you? Do they calm you? Do they give you just enough courage to keep going? That's the measure. That's how you know it's working. And over time, those simple, strong statements become your internal compass. They guide you back to yourself, back to your strength, back to your purpose. You don't need to say you're a superhero. Just say, I can handle this. Just say, I'm figuring it out. Just say, I've done hard things before, and I can do this too. Because you can. You always could. You just needed the right words to remind you that you can't change your life without changing your habits. And one of the most overlooked habits is how you talk to yourself in the quiet moments, the mornings, the moments of frustration, the late nights when no one else is around. That inner voice becomes the rhythm of your day, and most people let it run wild. But if you take just 3 days to intentionally shape that voice, you start creating a habit loop that shifts everything. That's not motivation, it's neuroscience. Let's break it down. Your brain thrives on repetition. The more often you do something, the more efficient your brain becomes at doing it. That's how habits form. You don't have to think about brushing your teeth or tying your shoes because your brain has hardwired those actions. The same thing happens with thoughts. If you constantly think, I'm not enough, your brain gets really good at defaulting to that belief. It becomes your emotional reflex. But when you start talking to yourself with intention, even for a few days, you begin to rewire that reflex. You start to create a new loop. This is where the habit building process comes in. There are 3 basic parts to a habit: the cue, the routine, and the reward. When it comes to self-talk, your cue could be something as simple as stress, a mistake, or a wave of doubt. That's when your old routine kicks in, you criticize yourself, shut down, spiral. But if you change the routine, if you pause and say something empowering instead of something critical, you change the outcome. And your brain feels the reward. The stress lessens, you feel grounded, you feel capable. That's how the new pattern starts to stick. And the beautiful thing, this doesn't require a total life overhaul. You don't need to rearrange your whole day. You just need to interrupt the old cycle a few times. You can do it while you're brushing your teeth, while you're waiting for your coffee to brew. When you catch yourself doom scrolling or comparing yourself to someone else, that's the moment to insert a better thought. To say something like, I'm doing my best today, or one step at a time, or this moment doesn't define me. These little sentences, repeated over and over, become a new internal habit. Think about it like training a muscle. You don't go to the gym once and expect to be strong. But if you lift a little every day, your body changes. It adapts. It gets stronger. Your brain is the same way. 3 days of consistent, intentional self-talk is like putting that muscle to work. You're telling your brain, this is what we focus on now. And it listens. Because your brain doesn't care if your thoughts are positive or negative, it just builds based on repetition. So why not repeat something that helps instead of something that hurts? This is also how confidence is built. People think confidence is a personality trait. It's not. Confidence is a skill, and the way you build it is through repetition of supportive thoughts and actions. When you talk to yourself with belief and encouragement, your behavior starts to change. You speak up more. You take that risk. You recover faster when something doesn't go right. And every time you do that, you collect proof. You build a track record with yourself. You start trusting that voice. That's what confidence is. It's the result of showing up and noticing that you survived, that you figured it out, that you're stronger than you thought. Let's not ignore how much easier it is to fall back into old habits. Your brain is wired to conserve energy, so it loves running old programs. That's why changing the way you talk to yourself can feel like a struggle at first. It's unfamiliar. But that's also why it works. You're pushing past the familiar into something better. You're choosing awareness over autopilot. And you don't need to get it right every time. You just need to catch yourself. Even one time a day where you pause and shift the narrative is a win. That's a rep. That's the muscle growing. So give yourself this gift for the next 3 days. Make intentional self-talk a habit. Use your phone wallpaper as a reminder. Write a sticky note on your mirror. Set a reminder in your calendar if you need to. This is a mental habit, just like brushing your teeth is a physical one. And when you get consistent, even for a few days, your brain begins to expect it. And that expectation is what fuels long-term change. You're not just building a habit, you're building a mindset. And when you shift your mindset, you start to shift your entire life. One thought at a time. The stories you tell yourself matter more than almost anything else in your life. They shape your identity. They dictate what you believe is possible. And most of the time, you don't even realize you're telling them. They're just there, playing in the background like a soundtrack you've gotten so used to you don't even hear it anymore. But it's still guiding your decisions. It's still shaping how you feel about yourself, how you respond to challenges, and whether or not you go after what you want. Here's the thing, those stories didn't start with you. They were shaped by your past, your environment, your experiences. Maybe someone told you that you were too much or not enough. Maybe you were judged for failing or criticized for trying. And slowly, without even meaning to, you internalized it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not creative. I always mess things up. And then your brain, trying to be helpful, starts looking for proof. It scans your life for the moments that validate that story. Every mistake, every rejection, every awkward moment becomes part of the narrative. And the more you repeat it, the more real it feels. But here's what most people don't realize. Just because a story feels familiar doesn't mean it's true. It just means it's rehearsed. Your brain believes what it hears the most, not what's most accurate. So when you start choosing a different story, one based on possibility, not limitation, your brain doesn't know the difference. It just starts following the new script. And that's not fake. That's not delusional. That's you stepping into authorship. That's you realizing that the pen has been in your hand the whole time. Let's say your old story is, I never follow through. That story might have come from years of starting and stopping things. So it feels true. But what if you replaced it with, I'm learning to be consistent? That's not denying the past, it's redefining it. It acknowledges the pattern and creates space for a new one. And when you say that story every day, your actions start to align. You're more likely to show up, to keep going, to build the momentum that proves the story right. Or maybe your story has been, I'm not confident. That's a common one. But confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. So, what if you rewrote that story as I'm building my confidence one action at a time? Now your brain has a job. It's not stuck in shame, it's focused on growth. And over time, with repetition and action, that story becomes your truth. You start to embody it. You walk into rooms differently, you take risks, you trust your voice. Rewriting your story doesn't erase the past, it reclaims it. It says, yes, I've been through some things. Yes, I've struggled. But that's not the end of the story, that's the beginning. And you don't need to have the perfect words. You don't need to write a novel. All you need is a sentence, a phrase that anchors you in possibility instead of pain. Something that you can say to yourself when doubt shows up, when fear creeps in, when the old story tries to pull you back. Try this. Write down the old story that's been running your life. Be honest. What's the sentence you catch yourself saying on repeat? Now, look at it and ask yourself, is this helpful? Is this empowering? Is this how I would talk to someone I love? And if the answer is no, then it's time to let it go. Not because it never happened, but because it's not who you are anymore. You've grown. You've learned. You're evolving. And that evolution deserves a story that reflects it. Then write the new one. Something you want to believe. Something that reflects the direction you're heading, not where you've been stuck. Say it out loud. Write it on a sticky note. Put it on your mirror. Let it become your new mental soundtrack. And every time the old story shows up, interrupt it. Replace it. Not once, not twice, daily. That's how change happens. Not with one big moment, but with 1,000 tiny rewrites. You are not the voice in your head, you are the one who gets to decide what that voice says. And the moment you realize that, everything shifts. You stop living in the story someone else wrote for you, and you start writing your start, one that's honest, empowering, and truly yours. That's how transformation begins, with the story you choose to tell today. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Talks. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into the incredible journey of voice AI and its impact on our daily lives. Most people wait for their lives to change before they change the way they think. They wait for the new job, the right partner, the perfect body, or the dream opportunity. Then they say, then they'll feel confident. Then they'll be happy. Then they'll speak to themselves with love and encouragement. But that's not how this works. That's not how change sticks. Real transformation doesn't come after everything falls into place, it starts before that. It begins the moment you change the way you speak to yourself. What you say to yourself becomes your emotional home. If you wake up every day and your first thought is, I'm so behind, then that's where you live under the weight of pressure and anxiety. If you constantly repeat, I'm not good enough, then your entire day is filtered through that belief. You hesitate, you play small, you second guess. And none of it is because you're not capable. It's because the conversation in your mind has convinced you that you're not. That's the power of your inner voice. It sets the tone. It directs the energy. It builds the foundation you walk on. Now imagine if that voice shifted. Imagine waking up and hearing, I've thought this. Even if you're tired, even if the to-do list is long, that one phrase changes how you enter your day. You show up differently when your mind has your back. And it doesn't mean you suddenly become fearless or perfect. It means you stop fighting against yourself. Most people don't realize how exhausting it is to be in constant mental conflict, to criticize yourself for everything, to doubt every step. It's like trying to run with the brakes on. When you change that voice, you remove the resistance. This is why self-talk is not just fluff. It's not some feel-good trend. It's the foundation of every single thing you do. Because the way you speak to yourself influences how you take action. If you say, I always mess things up, you're going to avoid risks. If you say, I don't belong here, you're going to stay quiet in rooms where your voice is needed. But if you say, I'm learning or I'm showing up anyway, then you start to take back control. You step into growth instead of fear. You have to become your own coach, your own motivator, your own teammate. Think about it. If you were coaching a friend through a tough time, you'd never say, you're hopeless. You're a mess. You should just quit. But somehow we say that to ourselves every single day. That ends now. You have to start treating yourself like someone worth fighting for. That means encouraging yourself when things feel heavy. It means saying, keep going, even when you're scared. It means being kind to yourself, not because life is easy, but because you deserve support from the inside out. And no, you won't get it perfect every day. Some mornings will still be hard. Some moments will still bring up doubt. That's okay. This isn't about perfection, it's about pattern. It's about building a new default setting in your mind, one that's grounded in self-respect, in resilience, in belief. You catch yourself when the old voice starts to spiral. You pause. You replace it with something stronger, something true, something helpful. That's the work. That's the rewiring process. The truth is, your words are like seeds. Every time you speak to yourself, you're planting something. So the question is, what kind of garden are you growing? One full of shame and fear, or one built on growth, courage, and grace? It's a choice. And you don't have to wait until everything in your life is perfect to make it. You start now. You start today. You start in the middle of the chaos, the doubt, the uncertainty. Because that's where real change begins, not when it's easy, but when it's needed most. So decide. For the next 3 days, commit to being on your side. Talk to yourself like someone who matters. Someone with value, someone in process, not someone broken. You don't have to believe every word yet. You just have to say them. Let the repetition build the belief. Let the new thoughts guide the new actions. Because when you change your inner voice, you change your experience of the world. You stop waiting for life to validate you and you start validating yourself. That's the shift. That's the power. And that's how your life begins to change from the inside out.